Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Closer Encounters. I am your host, Clarence Mitchell, coming to you live from somewhere, Minnesota. Would you like to be a guest on Closer Encounters? Or maybe you know someone that would like to be a guest on Closer Encounters. Or maybe you have a story to share. Well, please shoot us an email, closerencounters.info@gmail.com. Again, that's closerencounters.info@gmail.com. For everything Closer Encounters, updates, all things going on, check us out, www.facebook.com/Closer Encounters Radio. Again, www.facebook.com/Closer Encounters Radio. And please don't forget to like, follow, and share. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Closer Encounters. I hope everybody had a good week or week and a half, whatever it was since the last time I was on. As you can tell by my voice, I'm still a little bit raspy. I've been having some issues, weather, whatever, who the hell knows, but yeah, that's the way it goes for me. But yeah, I'm glad to see we got a lot of people in there. I see VJ's with us. Rob's going to be checking in with us by the looks of it. Kimberly, hello, Kimberly. Julie's with us. Fantastic. We got a few of them here on both sides of the spectrum here, so that's cool. Tonight we have a new guest with us. His name is Shawn Anderson. Hello, Shawn. How are you, sir?
How's it going? Happy to be here.
Cool. Yeah, as you guys can see from the description on the thing, we're going to be talking about ancient civilizations and stuff tonight. And as you know, I'm pretty much a firm believer, along with other folks out there, that we are not the first to walk on this planet, as far as Homo sapiens and stuff like that. I honestly believe, and I'm sure that Shawn believes the same way, that there's been many things that happened here on this planet long before we ever made the curtain, so to speak. So
Right.
yeah, Rob says yes, I will be on. Hello everyone. Cool, good deal. Yeah, I even sent a link to Omar, but he's got a show coming up, so I think he's going to get ready for his own show later on, which I hope everybody will catch after this one ends or whatever. That'd be awesome. So yeah, Rob will be with us by looks of it, so that'd be cool. So anyway, just to before we get started, I just want to say a couple of things. I got a lot of emails and some instant messages and stuff from people about my last show. apparently a lot of people didn't like what I had to say, and that's okay. That's it's not for everybody. There's Omar. Hello, Omar. How are you, bud? I see he signed up. Um, you know, just because I disagree with certain people or certain things that's going on doesn't mean that, everybody else has to follow that lead. That's just my opinions, like I tell people. So, que sera, sera. But I got a few messages and I just want to straighten something out. Um, Somebody, and I don't know who it was, got the idea that, some of my friends, uh, some of my hosts and whatever, and I are having a falling out, and that is not the case. I don't know where you guys got that from. Um, no, absolutely not. Uh, None of us ever had words. Everything's kosher as far as I knew, unless there's something in the background going on that I don't know about. But as far as I know, we're all pretty tight. So, you can drop that off wherever you got it from, because that's, yeah, that's what Omar says. What? Yeah. He says, good, brother. If they don't like it, fuck them. Yeah, exactly. It's funny. But yeah, I don't know what the deal was there. Uh, Omar says we're still brothers as far as I know. Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Matter of fact, I invited him on tonight, but he's got other things going on, so that's cool. But yeah, yeah, don't go there, people. Okay, that's not the case. Rob says, "Wow, really? Just gossip? Our relationship with each other is better than ever." Absolutely. Yeah, it's just we have various opinions throughout this deal, uh, and my opinions vary just like everybody else's. So that's just the way it is. So yeah, BJ says first I heard that one. Yeah, it was basically sent right to my email. I got a couple of them there, and I just shut them off as spam. I don't care, how that goes. But yeah. Rob says the big three: Omar, Clarence, and myself. That's funny. Cool. But yeah, yeah, drop that stuff, folks. It was just something that I did on my own, my own opinion. So it's nothing. Yeah. Omar says, Rob and I are doing a show tonight. I would love to do this one as well, but I'm getting ready for my guest. Yeah, absolutely. Understandable. Cool. And I hope everybody, can catch that also. He had a really good show on, what was it? You did 2 nights ago, 3 nights ago, I think it was. And unfortunately, the guy that they had on couldn't share his screen and stuff. So I think that's what's happening tonight. They're redoing that particular show. So I recommend to see it because it's a pretty good deal. So, but Omar says, I like to help full spectrum and as much as I can and closer encounters. Absolutely. Rob says opinions never get in the way of our friendships. Nope, absolutely. Yeah. So Omar says, hence why I did the last couple with Rob. Yeah, understandably. Yeah. Yeah. And I really, honestly, I haven't been up to snuff. This is the first show I've done since our last one. And, but I'm getting better. So here we go. Right. So anyway, on to what we were going to do tonight. Actually, we were talking about ancient civilizations and, are we the first? Are we not the first? Yeah, Omar, throw a link to that show of yours in the description there or whatever, and people can find it for you. So cool. But anyway, Shawn, getting back to our main topic. So what are you thinking there, bud? Well, actually, let me introduce you. This is Shawn Anderson. I actually worked with his father when I was in the mine. He was my 148, which is kind of like second in command. And if I had an issue, well, he ran the west side of the pit, and another person would run the east side of the pit, was what we called the 147. So his father my 148 was, on the west side, which I ran a lot more of than I did on the east side. But and we would always talk about ancient aliens and stuff. And we used to listen to Coast on our radios at night, different things. So it was pretty cool. Well, then he's telling his son about my show, and he's like, "Hey, you should get on Clarence's show," So yeah, here he is. So glad to have him. Very welcome,
Yeah.
John. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, it's one thing too, is like as more as I got open-minded as I kind of grew a little bit older, I would just talk with him a little bit more and more, and then all of a sudden, next thing I know, he's also one of those guys who has an open mind that we just had open-minded conversations, and it escalated more and more, and I don't know. I've done a fair share of research. I got some other podcasts and some other guys that I also watch about some of this stuff, and just one of those things that triggers the curiosity, I guess.
Right.
Makes you wonder.
So what have you come up with so far that you figure? I mean, what's your main thing that really got you in on this type of deal? As far as
So I recently just joined like the labor union, right? And I went down to go do some work training, just get kind of the gist of my hours in, and kind of bump up to a journeyman as soon as possible. And on my way down there, like I've been a history nut, but I always felt like history in high school is one of my top subjects. Right. I always was fascinated, like, ancient Romans or, ancient Mesopotamia and stuff like that. But then kind of somebody threw the pyramids at me and saying how, like, you can tell, like, it's water eroded.
Okay.
And I'm like, all right, well, I mean, I kind of can see that. Like, I can get it. And then I don't know what was up, but I was just on YouTube one day, kind of like looking at like ancient civilizations, and all of a sudden, like a Joe Rogan podcast with Graham Hancock, like popped right up. So I'm like, I got 3 hours to burn down to the cities. Might as well listen to something. So listen to that. And as I was driving, I was just like, holy shit.
Cool.
like, oh, a lot of some of this stuff makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so ever since then, I just kind of like looked more into it. Kind of it opened my eyes. As like I'd go out to like North Dakota or go out to Colorado, and you look at some like the geological hills, like the rolling hills, like the Black Hills and stuff like that, and you're like, like feels like there was some water or something that went through here, or something that you're just like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So it kind of opened up my eyes a little bit more.
Well, Minnesota was an ocean at one time. It was seas. We got shark's teeth and whale bones and all kinds of shit here in Minnesota. So where's the nearest ocean for Minnesota, right? I mean, crazy stuff. Yeah. Right.
It's like, and that's just kind of like it catapulted me in being like, well, maybe like, humanity is a little bit older than what we, actually expected it. And then, kind of like that, some of those podcasts or some of those guys that like, you read a couple books and you're like, okay, so I'm not the only one that thinks this.
Right.
Right. So
cool. Rob says, got to get back from the mic. It's hard to make out what he's saying. Oh, you're a little bit too close to your mic. Okay.
Oh, my bad.
No, not a problem.
Sure. Is this better, Rob? If I just kind of hang back out over here?
No, yeah, you're good. Yeah, cool. But yeah, what I was going to say, out of place artifacts is one of the main things that I look at too, as far as ancient times and stuff. They find stuff that have been buried for millions and millions of years, and not to mention that some of these temple sites and different things like that, they just you sit back and you scratch your head, and as people, I mean, they've been combed over by many scientists, and different things.
Right.
And everybody has such a different, wide opinion on when they were built, who built them, blah, blah, blah. And the whole thing is just, wow. Yeah. So you could spend years literally on this kind of a subject,
Right.
But,
one thing that kind of really fascinated me too was like the whole Atlantis debacle.
Mm-hmm.
and like the people saying, you know, like Atlantis is just a myth and whatnot. But if you look at like ancient maps, that like ancient Greek maps from like way back in like the Socrates era,
Right.
like they have like, you know, all of Antarctica mapped out. They have Atlantis on a map. Like it's off the side of like the Horn of Africa, I believe, is where they have it on the map.
Oh.
And all of a sudden it vanishes, and it kind of correlates with the Younger Dryas.
Mm-hmm.
If you you know what that is, which I mean, it was like the last mass melting of the last ice age.
Right.
And that's another thing that I guess really kind of interests me too, is all these ancient civilizations and all these, you know, I mean, even like go to like Quebec Tepe, out in between the Tigris and Euphrates, right next to, I think, Syria, or geography is throwing me off a little bit
close.
right here,
Yep.
but
Yep.
yeah. So,
Yep.
so, it just, it really starts making you think of like all of these ancient civilizations have one thing, or a few things in common, I should say. And they're all astrologically aligned.
Right.
Like, you know, north, south, like perfect right on the dot. Like the pyramids line up with
Orion's belt.
Yeah. Yep. Orion's belt. It's just like, what did they know back then that we don't know now? And why is it such a mystery now?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, here's the thing too about the pyramids, and of course Graham Hancock, who you mentioned, talks a lot about them and different things. And a lot of people now are speculating whether the ancient Egyptians even built the pyramids. You know,
right.
A lot of people are thinking that somebody else was already here and had built them. And when these guys came along, they just kind of took them over and claimed them as their own, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that, actually. Yeah. So, yeah, like it really, I think one of like the old scribes had that said something along the lines of like, we are taking these over from the gods.
Mm-hmm.
And they say that they were, I'm going to butcher this too. I just listened to it like 2 days ago, but I'm going to butcher it 100% right here. But it was along the lines of like, they're just like upkeeping it. Like they didn't make it, but they're just going to bring the upkeep into it. So it explains a lot of like how all like the carbon dating of some of the stones out there are so old, and then some of them are made out of limestone to kind of like fill up the gaps, kind of like painting over a new, you know, old paint, I should say.
Right.
So I mean, there's a lot of speculation on it. Like Robert Schock is one of the Egyptian guys out there that I've also kind of looked into and whatnot. And he has a lot of actually pretty good topics and stories that he goes off and what he really thinks happened too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can't think what the older guy was there that used to be head of the ancient stuff there for Egypt. He wound up getting fired because they didn't like the way he was running things.
Yeah.
But he hated anybody that would disclaim that, you know, the Egyptians did what they did, you know. And he wouldn't let nobody dig. He wouldn't let nobody, you know,
excavate
yeah. He was just downright freaking mean, you know. And yeah, Julie said it. I can't even. Zay Hawes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Yep, that's him. He was just an asshole, you know, all the way around. And so now they have a new guy who's doing it now, a younger guy.
Yep.
And he's been really, really cool about it. You know, he's into the ancient alien kind of thing and stuff like that. And
just trying to get some answers.
Right, exactly.
Like, I can totally hop on board with that.
And
like,
he himself is digging deeper into the ancient stuff than the other guy did. You know what I'm saying? So it's really cool that he's been there. So I'm glad to see it. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, he just didn't like it. But Julie says I'm live on the History Channel. That's funny. Cool.
Good. Glad having somebody in the audience over here being able to pull up facts that I don't know.
That's awesome. But we can go further back than that. Let's say like the Sphinx, for instance. Now it's always been my opinion, and a few others, of course, that's come along the way, that the Sphinx was there long before the pyramids were ever built. And when they talk about water erosion, I've mentioned this a few times here just recently. I honestly believe that the Sphinx got flooded. And I don't know if it was the Nile River that actually did it, or if it was a great flood, or whatever.
Torrential rainfall and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. But here's the thing: when you look at the Sphinx and you see how they got it dug out now, and you can see how the rain or the water, I'm not going to say rain, how the water had levels all the way down through. So for as big an area as what they have uncovered, all the way down to the paws and stuff, it's quite deep. It's probably, 20, 30 feet, from bottom to top. And each section, you can see that, there's lines all the way down to the bottom. So what that's telling me is that lake, I'm going to call it a lake because that's just exactly the way I look at it, that pool of water had sat there for thousands of years before it finally started going down and receding. Now, whether it was from evaporation or it just sunk into the sand, or however.
Right.
But eventually, of course, it, and then after that, the winds and stuff came along and blew the sand back in and covered the Sphinx up to his head, and that's a known fact. I mean, we got pictures of it,
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I agree with that.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it's they actually took core samples of that rock that was on the Sphinx body, and then on the head, and the head is newer than the body.
Absolutely,
by thousands of years.
Right. Well, they recarved it apparently from what they're saying, but that's
But also as how the pyramids are lined up with Orion's belt, the Sphinx is lined up with the zodiac sign Leo, which is a big cat, right? So it's it just makes you think of did the Egyptians actually make that, or did they just find it and then maintained it, kind of a thing?
No, I honestly think they found it. I think what happened was when they found it, I think it was buried in sand, and they may not have known about the body of it at all,
Right.
And they seen this head of a lion or whatever it was sticking out of the sand, so they just went up and chiseled it away, and that was it,
Right.
It wasn't until thousands of years later that man decided, hey, let's dig around that and see what's in. And they found the body and, the whole 9 yards, So I think that's exactly what happened. I think, that they didn't even know the body of that thing even existed. I think it was buried up to its neck, until modern times, what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
Started digging it out. Yeah.
I believe that 100%. One thing that really actually, what did VJ said something? I'm kind of paying attention to the comments here too.
Yeah, I can bring it right up on the screen. I think water erosion on the Sphinx is accumulated over at least 20,000 years, because I think it was built when that era was a rainforest. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
And we know that in biblical time, that they talk about how much grain and oats and stuff that the ancient Egyptians had. So we know that the Nile was there. It was rerouted, obviously. It used to run in front of it used to run in front of the pyramids and stuff. They had all kind of wheat and barley and stuff like that. I mean, the grain was just enormous, and finally, it's documented somewhere that there was a major drought there, and it killed everything off, basically, And that's what happened. So they moved on or did whatever, But,
so one thing that I found that was super interesting actually was everything like the rainfall and all this other jazz, and how humanity just kind of got reset is kind of what I would say. Like, I feel like we're not the first actual like intelligent human race on Earth. I feel like Graham Hancock even said this too, that we're just like thinking his words, we are just a culture of humans that have amnesia.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Well,
So
it's
like,
not really amnesia. It's just we don't know because there had to be a gap there from
right.
when ancient time ended and then we evolved or whatever you want to say we showed up. So, we're stumbling across these artifacts and stuff that we have no idea because
Right.
according to our time schedule, our records, nothing came before us. That's
Right. Right.
So
and if you believe anything else besides that, you're a pseudoscientist.
Exactly.
And get the hell out because you don't believe in whatever we're trying to tell you.
Exactly.
Kind of a thing.
Exactly.
So actually, I kind of did some free thinking on myself here too. And it was, I definitely feel like the cosmos has a lot of impact in what happened in our past and what will happen in our future. Like definitely thinking like what set us into the Younger Dryas was a comet impact or a meteor impact that hit the ice shelf of Greenland. And they're now with like the LiDAR, they're finding a 13-mile wide crater of where it put so much soot and put us into this absolute cold spell. And then froze everything, like everything in like the more or less northern kind of hemisphere. I mean, everything was closer together. All the continents were closer together, obviously. Sure. But everything in like that, I think they said the cutoff line was kind of like right below the Twin Cities, kind of like all the way up through Seattle. All of Canada was underneath a 2-mile, sheet of ice.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Right. No doubt about that.
So when something like catastrophic like that happens, and all of this time too, you have South America that is totally habitable. Like, well, I'll probably touch in on that here, if not today, at a different time. But all South America was habitable during the Ice Age, just because it was closer to the equator. It had so much sun, yada yada yada.
Right.
But during that, a cataclysm like that could really send people into like a more of a primal state. Like you look at Hurricane Katrina, when that hit, people in New Orleans underneath that water shelf, they went absolutely ape-like.
Right.
Like people didn't want to help each other out. They just wanted to make sure that they survived. Right.
Yeah.
Fighting people, even like the coronavirus epidemic, right? People are getting to a fist fight over toilet paper or for
battle of the fittest.
Yeah. Right. Or for water, like potable water or food, right? Like non-perishable food, right? People are fighting each other over that. Like that's a basic like primal state. Like that's like two chimps fighting each other because they just want to, poop somewhere closer to where they sleep.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. I want to say hi to Jamie. Jamie's with us. Hello. She says, looking good, Claire. Thank you. I don't know. It's funny. Omar says, I think it's at least 8 million years old. Follow the ancient jet stream above North Africa. VJ says very possible, and it originated was Anubis. Julie thinks, let's see, I can bring that up. I think it was the last orbital tilt / progression. The northern part of Africa was an ocean then. There are still whale bones as well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one thing with like ancient calendars too, is they're so like based off the cosmos that they incorporate the Earth's tilt, right? So like the Mayan calendar that was supposed to end in 2012, right? Well, I mean, that's just the estimate of it ending, okay? Like that's like it's incorporating the Earth's tilt of like 70 years, I think is what it is, in order for like the Earth to tilt like a degree or like a half a degree or whatever it is.
Right. Well, that's what we're having now with global warming. And Omar and I talked about this on our show a few times before. And I'm a firm believer. As a matter of fact, I even showed it on a couple of articles that we read where the Earth right now, the magnetic sphere around it, has shifted. So magnetic north and everything is now way out of whack, where it used to be over Canada. Now it's heading towards Russia. Matter of fact, it's right on Russia's doorstep right now.
Sure.
And if you notice in the news lately, we've been having tons and tons of tornadoes, which, okay, yeah, it is kind of tornado season, but it's kind of
Yeah.
early. Uh, Earthquakes out the yin yang. Holy shit. We've had earthquakes up in Oregon. We've had earthquakes in California, right next to Yellowstone. I mean, they've had a 4.8 here just the other day.
Which is actually kind of scary because there's a big old volcano underneath it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, but my theory on that, of course, is because the Earth is tilting, the magna ball that's in the center of the Earth, of course, is
right.
It's doing one of these numbers, and wherever the Earth tilts over it, that's the weakest point, and that's where all this activity is coming from, obviously.
Right.
So, hello, Christina. How are you, Bella? See, she's with us. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of different Earth changes. We're still in the last part of the last ice age, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah.
And this is just part of that cycle.
Fact.
Yeah.
That's a legitimate fact. We are technically I think it was like 3 degrees Celsius colder than what the average as far as we can get core samples out of a glacier out in Greenland. We are 3 degrees Celsius colder, which is like, I want to say like 32 degrees or something like that. 35. I don't know, something like that. We're like 30 degrees colder than what the average Earth temperature is, like has been throughout, history.
Yeah. Pretty crazy.
Right.
But yeah, they're all going after this global warming thing, and for whatever reason, science isn't stepping up and saying, "Hey, this is a natural thing, not to worry about it." Blah blah blah, whatever. But nobody's saying nothing.
Well, I mean, and now it's a political battle on that.
Well, exactly. Yeah, and
like
I wonder if it ties in.
Right. Yeah, like it used to be more of like a biblical or religion based thing of what you're supposed to believe and what you're not. Right. And then now it's shifting more towards a political, because politics has all the power. So
right. Yeah. Well, they're thinking that well, I read an article here not long ago. I posted about it, how they're blaming India and I think it was Russia or China or whatever it was, for the Earth actually making it shift, because all the weight now, because of all the building and all the water usage and stuff like that, has caused the Earth to lessen up on one side, and it's like a counterweight, and it tilted it, stuff like that, which, well, I don't know. I find that hard to believe, but
I mean, you think you'd have to do like, I'm not an expert on this at all, or don't claim to be an expert at anything, to be honest. It's just open-minded here, but I haven't looked or researched any of it. But I mean, you think gravity would have some sort of effect into it?
Yeah.
Like, you think that gravity would just keep you still or kind of something?
Yeah. Well, the Earth is a big, big place, regardless of how small it is compared to other planets. But, it would take a lot for humankind to actually shift the Earth itself. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Oh, yeah.
I don't think it's even possible. I couldn't fathom it, being that possible. Now, what may happen as far as Earth tilting is, if you take and the water sloshes over its basins and the oceans, because as the Earth moves, the oceans are going to move also, and I think if you get enough water on one side or the other, then it could possibly go on over. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that's,
I get that.
Because water is heavy. You're talking 8 pounds a gallon. You know what I'm saying? So, depending. But, yeah, crazy stuff. Omar says global warming is a hoax. It's all based on fear. Problem, reaction, solution. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, and like that, and that's the thing with like global warming too, is like, you look at the charts of past ice ages and like just the last 100,000 years, because there's core samples that they take out of icebergs and they take out of like the dirt and stuff like that, where it will tell you what happened during all that. Like, look at tree rings, like petrified wood and tree rings. Like there's a moment of growth and there's a moment of
dormancy.
Yeah. Right. And all that has to do is the whole transparency of how warm it is to how cold it is. Right. Like you look at like, you know, the plague, like the Black Plague back in the day, or the, there's one in like the medieval times. Forget the name of that. But if you look at it, and you look at the dates that they wrote down when the plague actually happened and like mass population gets destroyed, it's during the cold spells, because, you know, that's when your immune system doesn't get enough vitamin D. And that's when, you know, you're feeling your most frail, or you're, you know, not feeling well, because, you know, the food that you get, well, it wasn't a good harvest that year because it's colder. And now all of a sudden, like, you know, the heat and cold fluctuates. So now, you know, and like you look at like mass population starting to like rise again, like after the plagues, it's when the earth heated up.
Exactly. Now, David Rooker, hello, Dave. I see he popped in. He says there are only small parts of the poles that are melting, tiny areas. The rest is gaining ice. Wow, cool. Awesome.
I wouldn't put that. I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, I don't really keep up on that kind of stuff too much. I just go by what I hear off and on, you know, throughout the ages. But
right,
you know, but I do know that the Earth has made a move. We've discussed that before, where it's and we know that magnetic north definitely has made a move. It's been talked about many times, especially with aircraft and boats and stuff like that are all talking about it, how much they've had to change in the past few years. Hey, we got Rob with us. Let's bring Rob in. Hello, Mr. Rob. How are you, sir?
Hello, everybody. Hello. How is everybody today?
Cool.
Living the dream, man.
As always, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Rob, this is Shawn. Shawn, this is Rob. He's from...
Shawn, pleasure to meet you. I heard the beginning. You worked with his father, and he was your number 2 in command. You guys were in the mine. It's pretty
right. Yep.
Pretty excellent.
Yeah, we're basically talking about ancient times, Rob. That we're not the first intelligent people that's been here. We're talking about how the Earth used to be back in the day. Things like the Sphinx and stuff was here before the pyramids. So there had to be some type of intelligent life on this planet before our group showed up, or whatever. And we've discussed this before too, also a few times. How we think that man is a lot older and stuff than we believe. But
I feel that we're actually the 5th incarnation of man on this planet. The first would have been this is my personal theory. It's not, have a little bit of evidence to back it up. I know that a lot of the people, when they talk about Atlantis and Lemuria, they were actually the 3rd civilization to go and actually populate the planet. And I believe that there was some catastrophes at some point, but other points 100%. it was actually intelligent life leaving this planet because of things that were going on. And the first inclination of this particular planet, I believe, was from an outside source that came to this planet to settle it. Some stayed, some left. And after each one of these, let's say, I guess, civilizations, or actually of the 5 restarts, some were left over. Hence why in the times of like King Arthur, there was Merlin who could do all this crazy stuff because, just as an example. And I heard you guys talking about global warming. Now, to me personally, I believe global warming isn't actually global warming. This planet goes through stages and shifts, like it repeats itself. So as in the Ice Age, that wasn't the first Ice Age. That was probably the 3rd or 4th Ice Age.
Right.
Ever since the inception of the planet, they talk about global warming now, where the temperature goes up and down. And that's just a natural process of the Earth, maybe not repairing itself, but its natural life cycle, shall we say.
Right.
And also, I believe that global warming is created by governments to put carbon tax on people and to disrupt governmental flows for different countries. So United Nations would ban, these groups would actually have control of how much output. It's more of an economic thing than a natural thing.
Oh, absolutely.
There's not a super amount of science that backs that up. So,
well, here's the thing, right? If they were so worried about global warming and stuff like that, then quit cutting down the goddamn trees, right? I mean,
exactly.
That's, look at what forestry alone has done to the earth. and then we're polluting the goddamn oceans, and I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So yeah,
There's so many
okay.
things that they've done to disrupt the atmosphere and the environment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
We
now they're
killed off
telling
the
us
ecosystem.
we can't do certain things, but they can.
Right. Yeah.
Or
So
let's say
kind of to touch up on your story there, Rob. Like,
right.
actually, like, I mean, like, I pretty much am like, I'm following you with all that stuff. Like, definitely feel like we're not the first race that had to, like, you know, think its way to a superior race, is what, you know, everybody calls us. Like, we're the high intelligence race, and everybody else below us in the ancient times was just like what a child would, you know, do, right? Like, compared to what we can do now. Right. And I mean, you think about that, and then you think about, like, you know, what would have happened? Like definitely a catastrophe, like a meteor hitting, right, and wiping us, you know, all the, you know, technological, like, people, like even like Atlantis, like you said, like the third generation, right? Everybody said that Atlantis was this hub of, like, all the intelligence, right? And then all of a sudden it gets sent into the, you know, ocean. Now it sinks, right, out of sight. Nobody knows what went on. Well, I mean, when sea levels rise 400 feet, right?
Yeah, it don't sink; it just disappears.
Right. Yeah, it just got flooded out. So now you have everybody, like, you look at now, and you look at all these, you know, like, you look modern day, right? You look at, like, Beijing, Hong Kong, London, or, you know, Boston, right? You look at all these, like, New York, like, they're all on waterways, right? They're all a couple hundred feet above sea level. Now, what happens when the sea level raises 400 feet?
Yeah,
those are virtually gone. Like,
there's a wreck. They're the first to go. The first to go.
Right. So now you have the intelligence of, like, you know, everything that they knew, like everything that we know now, like how the concept of computers and stuff like that works, right? They're gone. And now you have to fight for yourself. Well, I mean, people in New York aren't going to know how to go hunting and fishing and know how to survive, know how to, you know, tie a freaking knot, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're just so comfortable in, like, you know, everyday situations. They go to work in their, you know, cubicle, come home, call her a day, right?
Right.
Well, they're not gonna be able to survive. But you have, like, you know, your farmers and your everything like that. Well, eventually they're gonna die off, and now this new, you know, people, you know, their children or whatever have to, like, you know, readjust to what's going on.
A new society will emerge from that breaking point.
Right. So the people that will 100% survive out of that are, you know, the hunter gatherers, we'll say, right? So you look at, like, those tribes that are contacted by human or, you know, modern civilization out in, like, the Amazon, right? Those guys have been surviving since forever. How long? Because they know how to survive. They know one thing: how to survive, right? So now what after the Younger Dryas, so, like, they say a meteor hit, put us into an ice age in the Younger Dryas, right? And this is kind of talking on, like, one of those subjects that you just did, one of the rebirths, right?
Right.
So what happens, and kind of my theory here too, is you have the people that have the knowledge of the past people, and they're trying to pass those knowledge on to the hunter gatherers, right? So, like, agriculture, modern agriculture, knowing how to, like, farm, right? To the people that can just go out, shoot a deer, have food for the week, right?
Right.
That don't know how to farm. Well, now you teach them how to plant corn, and now they have, you know, venison with corn, right? You know, like, they know how to, like, you know, stock up for the winter times, during the harsh times and stuff like that. So you have this handoff of technology, or
you know, that's funny you say that. Don't you find it ironic how the American Indian, you know, back when the Pilgrims came over, didn't know how to grow friggin' corn?
Right.
I mean, it took the Indians to show them you lay a fish in a row, it causes fertilization, it makes the corn grow. The people from England and that, you know, British or wherever they come from, you know, with Christopher Columbus, didn't even know how to grow corn. So they weren't much of a farmer as far as I'm concerned.
Hunter-gatherers.
It's ironic, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Oh, 100%.
Yeah, it took the natives to teach them how to do this stuff, you know. It's
100%.
I want to welcome Omar. Omar is with us. Hello, brother. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, homie. I just wanted to come in just very, very quickly.
Sure.
Maybe just 5 minutes. I've got a show coming up here with George in about 1 hour. I got to get him in the morning here in about the next half an hour or so. But anyways, the first thing I want to say is that this falling out bullshit that you heard is absolutely not true.
No,
And
absolutely not.
second, I heard you guys talking about the Sphinx.
Yes.
I'm like heavy into that kind of stuff, right? And I've looked into it a little bit. I'm not an expert or anything like that, but I think that the Sphinx may have been built at a later stages of the Lemurian root race, which was before the Atlantean root race. So when we look at that, that number kind of puts us anywhere between 44 million years and 8 million years ago. And also the Tortonian age we have to take in consideration, because during the Tortonian age, the jet stream, which is in Central Africa today, like over Sudan, Congo, things like that, that jet stream was about 8 million years ago during the Tortonian age was above North Africa. So a lot of water, a lot of precipitation, a lot of rain. So over a course of a little bit of time, which is recorded in history, in the samples and such from dunes, sand dunes and such, the jet stream began to move further south to where it is today. So, of course, along with that brought drought. And there was a lot of water in that area at one time because of the rain, a lot of fresh water, a lot of lakes. And when you look beneath the continental shelf of Africa, one of the biggest freshwater reservoirs are beneath the bedrock, because the bedrock of Egypt is very porous, right? So when it rains, the water soaks through and it goes down, and there's a massive reservoir. And Muammar Gaddafi was actually working, spent almost $2 billion, $1 billion or $2 billion in trying to pipe that water out to bring it to his people. But anyways, when we look at the water damage on the Sphinx, and when we consider the precipitation that may have fallen back in those days, anywhere between 44 million and 8 million years ago, that will have given it sufficient amount of time to have the damage that it has today. Because for the last several thousand years, or possibly even a couple of million years, the Sphinx is being buried, and there's been no precipitation, so there's no possible way of it getting the water damage as Dr. Robert Schoch suggests, because that's really his theory, that he says that the water did this and did that. But the guy's talking out of his anus, because he doesn't really know what he's talking about, because he's mainstream, right? He's mainstream everything kind of dude, right? He's got a paper and he's been programmed to say certain things, so he's just running with that. So he's an anus talker. But when you actually take things into consideration and look at the history and study the root races, like the Atlantean root races, the Hyperboreans, the Lemurians, when you go back, the human history is about 500 million years old. Even through the artifacts that Klaus Dana has collected, it goes back 350 million, 400 million years. So considering that, we can say, sufficiently, well, I can say sufficiently enough that the pyramid complex, which would include the Sphinx, is a minimum 8 million years old. At the very least 8 million years old, because we have to definitely look at the Tortonian age, because it was around that same time that the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Seas were created as well. Right, so some major event took place at about that time, and my personal feeling is that because of the fact that the pyramids are built at the very center point of all landmass, I think what happened at that time was, at some given time when this earth was being terraformed, they lifted that land out of the ground by using sound. And that's why you find like coral reef and seashells and such in the building of the structures and all around it as well. So I think that they lifted, so I think that they lifted the landmass out, or lifted it, raised it a little bit, but definitely it was raised. And then from there, the Sphinx and the pyramid complexes were built.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's just
super interesting. Not super interesting.
My take on it, and I've done a little bit of research into it, and then written a few articles about it. There's no scientific backing to this, but when you start connecting dots, the dots seem to connect and make a picture, right? And the image
line up,
me, yeah, the image that's showing me is that the Sphinx and the pyramid complex were built by the previous root race. Now, if you don't know what the root races are, just just Google the 7 root races, and then from there, it'll show you the main 7 root races, and from there it'll give you the sub-root races that came off of those races, right? So we have a very long history. Like I said, goes back about at least a minimum of 500 million years, and the things that they're trying to teach us is the Darwinian timeline, and that Darwinian timeline is connected to Saturnism, because 12,000 years ago, when we emerged out of this ice age that we are actually currently in, as you guys were talking about earlier, when we came out of essentially the underground, because we were living in cities like Kuyu and stuff. And when we look at the Hopis, they're talking about living underground for many generations.
Mm-hmm.
So it was artificially created for us to come out, because all of this is connected to Saturn, and the frequency that's coming off of Saturn that's being used against us to lower our vibrational distortions, so that we have dense energy, so that these archonic entities and beings can feed off of our energy. So they've given us this false perceptual reality where they're telling us that we're only a few thousand years old, and that we really have no history, and that we're monkeys, and that we only use 10% of our brain, and it's all geared towards that false perceptual view that they're trying to give us, because they're rearing us for food as we rear chickens, essentially. Now their food is different compared to our food, because they're able to change their vibrational field, right? So meaning that they can change their frequency so that they can appear and disappear, right? So that's why we don't, really see them, and that's why David Icke calls them shapeshifters, because when they change their frequency and their vibrational distortion, they can appear to be human, but underneath that vibration, they're actually not human; they're a reptilian being. Right, and then it's those things that have been controlling us for the last 12,000 years, and that's it. All right, guys, I got to run. So I got a show coming up here with George Mitrovic. I just thought I'd just quickly jump in here, and then for all the naysayers out there, who are sending you emails and personal messages and such, right? It's all garbage. It's bullshit. You've been sick for the past week. I've done a couple of shows with Rob, because Rob's about to launch Full Spectrum Universe. So I thought, I'd give him a platform and a space to work on his interviewing skills and help the guy out, right?
Well, it's just funny. We all work together. Yeah, it's just funny how people think that way, and I'm like, where the hell did you come up with that? Nobody said a word about nobody, and it just, I don't get that. But
well, look at the naysayers. The 3 of us are here right now. Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the usual bunch.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Maybe.
It's crazy.
Maybe it was Clarence. Maybe it was from the fact that I support and follow David Icke, and you have different ideas on David Icke, and so our ideas clash, and suddenly people think, "Oh my God, Clarence is talking shit about David Icke, and Omar's the follower of David Icke." Yeah. So they're hating on each other right now. No.
We don't hate.
Opposing opinions never cause hate. Opposing opinions never cause hate.
Yeah. That's funny.
If we had the same opinion on every single subject, then there would be no point in us collaborating on shows and events, and which we've been doing for years now. So
it's funny.
All right, I got to go, guys.
Point of view to make it good. I'll see you in a little bit, Omar. I'll be with you soon.
Man.
Okay, brother. You take care. Have a great show. We'll catch up with you after the show, and maybe if you're still running, we'll jump in and see yours there. So awesome.
Yeah, cool. And I've been working on that event, the Cryptics, that we talked about, Bigfoot and Sasquatch and Skinwalkers and all that, right?
Oh, don't even get me started.
And trying to put that event together. So as soon as I got a little bit more information on that, I'll shoot you a message, and then we can come up with a plan. Because this time we only want to do a daytime event, right? Not 2-3 days long.
Yeah.
Right. So as soon as I got more info, I'll shoot you a message. But I'll shoot you a message after my show here tonight. I'm only going to go for about an hour 15 minutes, not too long.
If you need another mouth on the whole Bigfoot debacle, count me in. I got a story, man.
Cool.
All right, cool.
We got
Yeah,
stuff
for
lined
sure.
up for that.
Talk to Clarence with that because we're collaborating on that event too. So that'd be cool.
Sure.
All right, guys. Much love.
Yeah.
Take it easy, and thanks for watching and listening. Bye.
All right, brother. Later.
Bye, Omar.
Cool. All righty.
So I do have a theory of Atlantis and Lemuria, as we know that they sort of coexisted around the same time, from what we understand of story.
Around
And
that younger Dryas era.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not so sure that Atlantis sunk. My theory is Atlantis took off and left.
some people believe that. Yeah.
Well, here's what I'm thinking, right? There's floods and ice ages, which are repetitive with nature.
Mm-hmm.
This is all what ifs. This is just my own mind creating a scenario of what might have happened.
Right.
Atlantis was super advanced, right? And there were some people inside of Atlantis that didn't maybe see eye to eye with the way things were being run. And they created Lemuria, taking whatever they could with them, but not exactly the same extent of technology.
Right.
So Atlantis was in the ocean, Lemuria was ground based on a continent, wherever it may be. Maybe Atlantis was using geothermal energy to basically fuel that specific city or spaceship, whatever it may be, mothership, while it stayed in rest in the ocean. Instead of using their own drives or, their own power source, they basically, like we do, we funnel off of whatever's around us in the earth.
Right.
It's part of human nature.
Right.
So when it was time for, these budding ideologies to not see so eye to eye anymore, possibly Atlantis took off and left, leaving that gap of draining thermal energy for so long that they were harvesting this thermal energy that it caused the planet to go into some type of disbursement of this geothermal energy that made the polar caps melt a little bit. There was excess because they were using so much of it over time that it was fueling their specific cities. Now, Lemuria being ground-based, wherever it may be, didn't survive that catastrophe of that flood. And another way we look at this is if we take a look at the Bible, they say that people lived for 900 and some odd years in the beginning before Noah's flood.
Right.
So it's sort of a marker that we see that technologically advanced societies, of course, they cure disease, they create, things to make you age younger, all types of advancements.
Right.
But
like Moses was 200 years old, kind of a thing, right? Like they had something to make him last that long, right?
Well, no, it was 900 and something when he died. So,
So what happens is the people that leave Atlantis, they gave people an option, Atlantis. You can stay, you can go, whatever the case may be. Those who stayed behind after it took off took refuge in a mountain somewhere until the flood subsided. And then they went over into Egypt. And then you see Egypt being built. And then they, and as it goes on, there are biological markers as they sort of evolve on this planet and evolution, to put some Darwinism in it. It kind of dumbed down their Atlantean genes as they kept
kind of primalized them. Yeah.
Right. So now we get to regular man as of whatever the scope is, could be millions of years, hundreds of millions of years. They actually just found rope that was 200 million years old, and they don't know where it came from.
Exactly.
That was just found the other day. So
was that like made of like yak or something like that, or like ancient yak or something like that?
Something like that. I mean, there's fossils that exceed, maybe not human fossils, but fossils that exceed. And you wouldn't find human fossils of 200 million years old if people were. I mean, of course, you would find some fossils, but if people were living 900 years in a lifetime, the fossils are going to be far and few between, especially if they were technologically advanced and only a few of them lasted that long. To rebuild a society would take 1 million years to populate.
Well, not only that, but you got to remember too, now we're talking millions of years, and the earth is constantly growing, it's expanding, and it's got more dirt and dust coming in from outer space on top of it. So you're talking miles and miles of depth for ancient time. I mean, if you want to find like a dinosaur bone, which is supposedly 65 or 650 million years, you only dig down 300-400 feet, right?
Right.
Whatever. I mean, I'm just using it as an example.
I get it. Yeah.
So
I get what you're saying.
anything that's older than that, you'd have to dig down another 300 or 400 feet. So
You can only go so far. You can only go so
exactly,
far
right?
with the clay and the rock
Right,
and the sediment.
exactly.
You can only go so far now.
Rock. Yep.
Yeah, but
Right.
to bring up that point now, look at that hammer they found. Now, we were talking about out of place artifacts earlier. Look at that hammer they found that was embedded in the coal, or in that stuff, and the handle was turning into coal. I mean, this is how old this thing is.
Right.
So what the hell? Where did that come from?
Right.
And that was solid
precisely-
iron. I mean, that's
my
not,
theory.
yeah. So
And the people that got left behind couldn't take the technology with them because
no,
as Lumeria was whisked away under, a deluge and a flood,
yeah,
like you said, sediment builds on top of it. It becomes, people took refuge to the mountains or in the mountains. So then they become more primitive to live. As you said, like a hunter-gatherer always survives.
Mhm.
They were taken down to their most basic need of food, water, and survival. So,
right.
and that's when you see like things like Tutankhamun and Akhenaten and all these specific special type of people
Mhm.
hence again, Merlin, they
Right.
still kept some of that lineage and some of those genes. But
Right.
as time goes on, people got dumber and dumber. Not to be a dick, but
Yeah.
they became dumber and dumber and dumber. Look what's happening right now with society, right? Mass media is brainwashing a lot of people
Oh, ain't that
to
the
think a
truth?
certain way, and they want people to be submissive.
Mhm.
And
100%.
submission comes over time. It takes a long time to put that out.
Right.
But there's plans for that, and that's just a theory that I think. I mean, I was just wanting to put it in front of people because I do theorize about certain things. And I think a lot about this kind of stuff. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm tapping into something that is like an Akashic record. I do a lot of like meditation, and these types of things come to me. So maybe it was some specific type of download or something like that. I don't know, but I just wanted to see what people thought of that.
Right. So
Right.
like with meditation and everything like that, like I'm like actually genuinely curious here. Like, does it help like open your mind up even more, if you will?
What you saying, like the rotation of the Earth?
No. I mean, like just you see people that like hit like deep levels of like meditation and stuff like that just like legitimately like I've never done it before.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So, but like
it's
like
a self thing. It's something that how do I want to explain it? It's like Buddhist, people like that are self-absorbing this energy,
right.
to get their enlightenment, their
Right.
guidance and whatever. That's what that's all about. Yeah.
Here's what I think about meditation. When you're meditating, you're calming yourself, but you're also raising your vibration.
Right.
We know everything runs on vibrations. Okay, everything has a frequency.
Mhm.
Once you raise that frequency or lower that frequency, you become more how do I say this? Like you see more of what's on that specific vibration. So
Sure.
until you get to that point, maybe certain things will open up for you where you can see or think about certain histories, and it'll seem like it's more fluid in your mind. So it's really a vibrational thing, and as you raise vibrations, you basically your body gives you this information that wouldn't normally be available to you because you're not
Right.
sitting on that frequency. That's
Right.
personally, that's what I think. But it helps too because there's a lot of mental illness around here, and everybody, just about everybody has anxiety and depression now. They've just labeled
Right.
it. So
Right.
you knowing that there's such a thing called anxiety and depression, you fall susceptible to finding yourself to relate to things that you see and hear. So your mind goes into this valley, shall we say. Instead of hitting the peaks, you sit in
Mhm.
this valley and you resonate with what people are telling you. And it's basically like an osmosis thing. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
before they
You feed
could
into it and it reacts to you.
Yeah.
Right,
absolutely.
right.
Yep.
Your body is susceptible to your thinking, which shows you that your conscious mind, above all else, is the most powerful thing in the world. Really, it's
Right.
it dictates how you live your life and how you want to live your life and how you feel about your life. It dictates emotions, and emotions, like you were saying before, with people in the grocery stores fighting over
Right.
toilet paper. That's an
paper.
emotional response to
Right.
to a crisis. They become animals and survival, and that's all emotional. So if you can control your own emotions, you are one of the most powerful people on this earth. That is my
Absolutely.
personal feeling about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with that one actually. Yeah, and even with that, like, I mean, probably different themed podcast for a different time, but like
Right.
also, yeah, like anxiety and depression, and like all coexisting with like, like I just spit out this word of drugs stuff, right? Like different topic for a different day, but yes, like how they just go, I've dated a girl with really like severe anxiety and bad depression, right? The doctors just go, "Hey, here's some drugs.
All right.
Hopefully it works," rather than like, what's making you, why are you feeling like that? Like they don't care. They just, here are some drugs, hopefully it works, kind of a thing. So
exactly.
Well, that's the hints of the dumbing down. It's making you dependent upon them to give you a rational thought
Making
of
you
a
rich.
specific feeling. You
right.
look to them to say, "Oh, well, not only that, you're looking to them to say, fix it, fix it."
Yeah.
Right.
It's not fixable. It's something you live with, but you have to come to terms with your own mind and the way you feel about these things, which will
Right.
empower you 110-fold. You
And
know what I mean?
oh yeah, 100%. Like me personally, like, and I'm really thankful for it, but don't have any depression and don't really, suffer from any anxiety. And it's just because like at a younger age, I kind of, had a more powerful mind of like mind over matter kind of a thing, right?
Yep.
So it's like, I don't know. I understand it. I have lived with people that have had it, but it's also like I have done things differently than what you've done in life, and now I kind of,
Yeah.
I understand it,
Sure.
but I don't have it. Right.
Right.
I feel that it has a lot to do with your upbringing because I grew up in a very proud Italian family.
Sure.
And my grandmother, we used to call it, her name was Madeline Noto. We used to call it the Madeline Noto School of Hard Knocks. She used to tell you, get up off your ass, stop feeling sorry for yourself, and do what you got to do. Be a man and face what you have to face.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Nobody's going to coddle you. Nobody's going to tell you how it should be or going to be. You're going to determine that on your own, which, for me, it's kind of crazy too, because, I look, and my mother was never super worried about a lot of things, but as she gets older, she tends to worry more. So it's basically the way society has projected onto her, and she's letting it get to her.
Right.
This crisis has only made me stronger. I'm also an empath, and I can feel a lot of shift. I mean, I have a lot of different abilities. I can heal with my hands. I'm a very spiritual person. Maybe not in the sense of looking towards a higher power, but what I'm capable of doing myself. I turn more into the internal, which will project my external, as opposed to looking for something else out there, because I don't know what's out there. But,
cool.
Going back to into ancient civilizations, they all had different ways of handling these same type of feelings without being coddled. They were, if anybody had anxiety, you would think it would be a caveman running from a fucking running from a saber-toothed tiger who's going to eat him.
Right.
You would be worried about that going to sleep every night.
Exactly. Yeah.
But they lived with it, and they faced it, and facing those things only makes you a better person and makes you stronger in the long run. So maybe it's not that you don't have showing anxiety and depression. You faced it. You're not scared of it. Therefore, it doesn't have the same effect as it would on somebody who's a little bit less inclined to face the things that they have to face on a daily basis. And meditation does help to clear your mind and let you see those, for me, those paths. And I overanalyze everything. I'm super analytical, and I think of every which way that situation can happen to like the umpteenth power. I'm telling you.
Oh, I feel you on that one, man.
It helps me. It helps me to make my decision and reason and get through life on a strong foot, I guess I could say.
Right. Cool.
I've been faced with adversity, but you don't see me crumbling under it. I'm here with you guys right now, speaking to, and that's another thing for me too, is giving back to anybody and everybody who will listen, because if I can just change one life, then my job here on this planet is done. I can die happy. I want to free people's minds and let them think. And even if we don't agree, I'm just happy that you felt passionate enough and backed it up with whatever feelings that came out of your mouth and mind
Right.
to feel that way. And that's what my show, actually, the Full Spectrum Universe, is going to be about. It's going to be about theory, but it's going to be also about the human condition and what makes people feel so strongly about what they're telling you, whether I believe it, whether I don't believe it, whether I agree, whether I don't agree. It's all super interesting. You know what I mean?
Hey, man.
Sure.
If you need a guy, just let me know. I'll hop on your podcast all day, man.
Yeah.
But
you'll definitely be there. I'm waiting for my laptop now. I had to order it through HP because of this crisis, and they're not going to ship it out until the beginning of May. But I've got a super great laptop coming. I'm working on getting a microphone too, like you guys have there. You know, I've got a headset already, so I'm just waiting to get it all into place. And
definitely recommend doing like a Samson mic that you can get at Best Buy, or like a Blue Snowball. Those things are awesome. Like I stream a lot of the times, and this is like the main mic that I use is a Samson. It's awesome.
It sounds super clear.
It does.
Sounds super clear.
Good. Yeah.
Well, that's good. This is like the third time I've used it, so
yeah.
Exceptional.
Good.
I'm actually on my phone right now, which is crazy. I'm doing this podcast. I usually do it from my phone because I have laptops here, but they're like for work orientation, like for basically working from home. So I try not to mix business and pleasure, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah, you want to keep one system all by itself.
Well, exactly. And if people go on from, they can open up from my workstations from anywhere else and slave my computer and go through everything and say, hey, what were you doing podcasts from your phone? Right. What is this StreamYard? What is this?
240. Oops. Anywho,
right.
We had some people in the chat.
I saw a good comment back there from. Let me bring it up real quick. I'm just going to look at the chat. Yeah. It was Ben Chetwood said the Egyptian hieroglyphs spoke about everything they did in their culture, from how they bathed to how they made love. You would think that they would mention the construction of the pyramids and why they built them, but nothing of that. Maybe because the Egyptians didn't build them. I agree.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Yeah, and you do find that odd. I mean, there are some painted pictures of people pulling blocks with ropes and stuff like that. I'm not sure where they're out of, Cairo or someplace maybe.
There's like a quarry that they used all those blocks on, like 120 miles south of where the actual pyramids got built.
Right, yeah.
Imagine that. Imagine being that guy pulling that rope. You can go to hell with that. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably why they had an uprising of some sort, because people didn't want to pull rocks 120 miles anymore,
Exactly. Yeah. Brent also says ancient archaeologists have made a connection in the construction of all pyramids around the globe as if they all were guided by one entity. And, and that we've talked about this before, where there may have been like one or two societies from different places that taught those folks who lived there or whatever at the time on the construction, or built it themselves, whichever, because that's why you have such a difference. Like, say, like in the pyramids of Giza, they're all made out of square block or rectangular block, right? And then you go down to where, say, like the Incas or not
Mesopotamians, but the Mayans.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the Mayans,
Aztec,
the Aztecs and stuff like that. They build a different style pyramid, even though it's a pyramid, So you always have, they're always pyramidal, but they're a different construct,
I found it really fascinating when I realized that, or when I read it, that way back in like what was it? When 1492 was when Columbus sailed here, so it was the early 900s.
The ocean blue.
Yeah. So the early 900s, when a Spanish conquistador went through the Nile River, went from west to east,
right?
And he talked about how there's so many thriving civilizations in the South America, millions of people, super nice, so much gold, and
which they
went
robbed
back
from. Yeah.
Well, right. Well, I mean, apparently the South American tribes are super giving, right?
Yeah.
Like they would give them the gold. Like they're like, hey man, this is shiny. You guys are new. Welcome.
Well,
Kind
you
of thing,
get-
right? Kind of
Have fun.
like what
It's beautiful.
China did before they built the wall, for the Mongols attacked, right? They were super giving.
Yeah.
Like they would just send ships full of their goods to people, like just random people. Like here's a ship full of fine silk, right?
Yep.
So the Spanish conquistador went from west to east, right? And then sailed all the way back to Spain to talk about what happened, like all these super nice people that he met and everything like that, wrote it down in books.
Yeah.
And in right before Columbus came to America, they sent a expedition they sent a bunch of conquistadors down to South America, right?
Yep.
Well, they couldn't find anything. It was just rainforest grew up, right? Like just foliage everywhere. They said this guy's full of shit, whatever. They sailed back to Spain, right?
Right.
Well, what ended up happening, and now with modern LiDAR and everything, is they found these civilizations that were just ginormous, right? Underneath 100 feet of dirt, because the rainforest whatever foliated over all this shit,
right?
And what they did is they found these massive societies that this guy wrote down. I'll find his name here in a second, but that he wrote about in these books, right? Well, what happened is some guy on his crew, or some people on his crew, had smallpox, and smallpox ran through and wiped out everybody. And into the 50 to 100 years that it took for Spain to come back across the sea, however many people died out, and then the foliage grew back up. Yep. So now that guy's chock full of shit. And until 2012, everybody thought this guy was full of shit until they started finding all this stuff that he was talking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, them complexes. That one Mayan civilization. When they found that one pyramid, I think it was the Pyramid of the Sun, or one of them, such as that. They thought, okay, this is a nice complex, it held 5,000 people, blah, 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 blah. Well, now that they've done LiDAR on it, they found out that this is like 100,000 people. It's hundreds and hundreds of miles long and wide. There's this complex. They just hit the tip of the iceberg with the pyramid. That's not it.
Right,
this thing went on forever. It was enormous,
Well, and that's
huge.
the thing, though, and to touch back in, to loop back around what I was saying, the first 10 minutes into this conversation or this podcast was during the last ice age, during that Younger Dryas era, and that's kind of the thing that I've been studying the most about is that 12,000. 600 to 11,200 years ago. Right. is what I've been mostly kind of fascinated about. The last even what Rob was saying, the last time we had to restart as a human race.
Right.
But that's one thing that I was looking about, and it's during that last ice age, South America is so habitable, right? That's why they say the rainforest doesn't have that many poisonous plants, right? That was the place to be. The rainforest was a literal garden. If they had something that would poison somebody, they'd take it out of the garden, right? And they just plant cocoa beans or vanilla beans and stuff like that, right? Stuff that they could eat.
Yeah,
it's a modern day garden, but just many thousands of years old.
Hence the Garden of Eden, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
actually,
that's basically what it is. Yeah.
So just to go, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, man. All you.
Well, no, I'm going to go back to the pyramids. I was on a podcast the other day, and a gentleman said, the blocks are so close together and so integral, and some technologies we have now mirror what some of the ancient civilizations had back in the past. Maybe that they were, if not more advanced than we are, they could have been 3D printed.
Oh, sure.
Just like we 3D print right now.
Yeah.
And they did it everywhere, all over the place, just to show, hey, we're here.
because the one place in my mind that would be 3D printed is Pumapunku.
Mm-hmm.
You will never, ever convince me that modern man made that place. There ain't no freaking way. That was
No,
machined and tooled to a
they
point
put
that
they put calculations into a computer and dropped
Yeah,
it right out, just like we do
exactly.
now, where
Well,
they make whole
look at how
prosthetic
many
limbs with perfect,
they're almost
resonance
all
to their
identical.
owner.
Yeah, each block was identically made. Other than the width and the
Right.
whatever.
And think about the shape too.
Exactly.
More material has to be put at the bottom, but as you come up,
Yeah.
ooh, there it goes to the tip.
Yeah.
And as the resources ran out, then you would top the pyramid off. That's all.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that kind of would make sense here. I just pulled up
That
an
blew
image
my
too.
mind.
So.
I didn't even think about that. That blew my mind when he said it. I said, "Holy cow!"
Yeah.
I said, "You know what?
Will be the
That
first thing I
sounds
think of.
viable."
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So
Fantastic.
back to the Garden of Eden over here, man.
Yeah.
I was just so also what I was kind of touching on earlier was how like the climate goes from minus 4 degrees Celsius to like 4 degrees Celsius, right? Like it has that fluctuation of that 60-degree temperature.
Right.
Well, when the Garden of Eden, or when the whole biblical kind of a version of when all of this actually happened was right as a warming cycle hit, right? So there was a cold cycle, all the crops were down, 1,000 years or so of like, all this, these crops being, barely enough to harvest. Right. Yeah. Literally, like people went on like a devastation. Like they say that the human race was on the verge of extinction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden a warming cycle hit, right? And now all of a sudden foliage is through the roof, right?
Yeah.
So now you have less people, but so much more vegetation and stuff, right? To habit the people.
Right.
Well, what ended up happening? People had sex to repopulate the human species.
Yeah.
And people started like, inevitably eating everything that they could because everything was dang near, edible at that time.
Right.
So it was, I'm still kind of vague on it. I kind of was listening to something about that earlier today, and I kind of read something about it like a couple weeks ago, but I'm, still kind of fresh in my mind. But still,
well, the thing. I have to go along with like Rob's deal, about 4 or 5 times that it's been rejuvenated.
Oh yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because you look at the species of man, when you go back to Neanderthal, Denisovians, Homo sapiens sapien, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, just take one of those. Let's say we'll go back to Neanderthal. All right. Or even before that, I forget, Cro-Magnon man. Right.
Sure.
Let's say you start off with one of those deals. Now, where in the hell did the other ones come from? You cannot evolve from just one species into another. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Oh yeah. It's like they say the mammoth. The
the
mammoth had 5 different species, right?
Well,
like
here's the thing, right? If you're going to be a Cro-Magnon man, you're always going to be a Cro-Magnon man. Okay. Your families are all going to be Cro-Magnon people, right?
Interbreeding.
You're not going to turn into a Neanderthal. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So each one of those species has to be a separate made entity at a certain time, a certain level.
Well, here's the thing, too. Who's to say that Cro-Magnon man wasn't smart?
Well, I'm not saying he wasn't.
They theorized he wasn't smart.
Yeah,
but there's no real evidence to say that, well, they were doing only cave paintings. We've been doing cave paintings in ancient Egypt. They could talk, they could write, they did mathematics.
Absolutely.
What's the difference?
100%.
Yeah. Look at the cave drawings and the stuff that they did. Smart, very smart, crazy stuff. But yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of with you on that deal, Rob. Where, each species, on whether they died off, became extinct or whatever, or later on down through the generational period, somebody else came along and said, boom, let's make this species now. It's time for these guys,
Well, that also backed up my theory too, is as one civilization dies off, there's always some left over.
There's always a rebirth.
The other species that was there before them, or the people that were there before them, because Cro-Magnon man and Neanderthal lived at the same time.
Well, we know there had to
So-
be some kind of inbreeding also, because there's DNA proof now that, Neanderthal and like Denisovians and or Neanderthal and Homo sapiens have the same genome. So we know that somewhere down that line, somebody bred with an offshoot, So
Actually, so Omar just commented the global pyramids are all connected and the work is a single machine.
Right. Yeah.
So like I understand, like I get it, like they're all kind of like connected. Yes, like they all show like a similar kind of scenario here too, just touching in with Omar here. I feel like it's just kind of like a technology that was kind of passed down.
Well, sure it was. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't know if it was all made from like
distributed
Right, oh, yeah.
throughout the people from a different, like one race of, let's say, we all believe in ancient astronaut theory. One race of aliens came down, or extraterrestrials came down to help all these people build them. That's it.
Well, I mean,
done.
you'd be close-minded to not think that. Like imagine us in like 10,000 years at the rate that we're going, and let's say like there's nothing that causes any disrupt in any of our technology, right? Like it would be insane to go like out into outer space and find another Earth, right, with just pure primates on there, and not be like, well, we can probably fuck with their DNA a little bit, and like
they do that now. That would be the first thing that they would do. Is if we saw another species on a planet, we would either help them to get to the level that we're at, or somewhat close to the level that wewe're at, just keeping an edge on it. Maybe not all the way, but we would keep some aces in our pocket. We would do the same thing.
You got to look at our technology that we got. Okay, just in our society. Let's go back to 1492 when Columbus hit America. Right, we lived in log cabins. We had to hunt. We had to grow our own food. Blah blah blah. That kind of thing. Very backwoodsy, right? We had no technology, gunpowder wasn't very good, this kind of stuff, what I'm saying? We were at a learning curve still, even with metallurgy and stuff like that, Now, from 1492 until now, how many years is that, you figure? We're at 2020, so
600.
Yeah, 600. Yeah,
500 something, but you round up to 600.
That's very minute. Think about that.
So
500, 600 years, and we're sending men to the moon.
Okay. Oh, actually, even that, like, let's take it on a bigger scale. Like my great grandfather, right? Three generations ago, he was on a horse and carriage.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
3 generations ago. We'll say 25 years is a generation.
Yeah.
Like,
well, my father did that. They used to plow with horses.
Right.
Right. Before they bought their first tractor in the 40s.
Right.
Yeah.
So like
the last 100 years. The last 100 years. So it's a serious boom.
Yeah.
A serious boom.
So going from horse and carriage to sending a man on a rocket ship to the moon was 60 years.
Yeah.
60 years. So we're close-minded to think that, how has technology like that not happened before? Exactly.
Now, maybe not in such a short span, but it was there just the same, And like I said, these out-of-place artifacts and stuff, there's so much proof of it. It's just unbelievable. But nobody wants to talk about that, They want to forget about it.
Because it disrupts the mainstream media's book of history.
Yeah.
Once they have to rewrite history, they end up being wrong in the first place, and nobody ever wants to be proven wrong.
Yeah,
no matter what.
Well, that's where you get the pseudoscientists from, man.
Yeah, this brings me back,
and the pseudoscientists are usually the ones that are correct.
Yeah, and this brings me back to that famous tribe that I love talking about out of old Europe, the Dambu Valley people. All the artifacts they found from them. What a phenomenal deal! Long before Mesopotamia even existed.
Right.
They had their first writing. They built the wheel. These guys. They were copper smelters, for Christ's sake. Technology that nobody would have ever dreamed of back in that day, And then they up and disappeared,
So
The
with
first,
that,
the first major advancement for this civilization was the creation of the aqueduct and irrigation. Once water could be brought into the town and nobody had to walk back and forth with pails and buckets, that set off a lot of different things that they could experiment with
Yeah.
because it centralized people together as opposed
So-
to being so far spread out.
Well, the Romans
Yeah.
covered that technology. You know,
and,
they
and
built that
was even
waterway.
above, and that was even above their time. So
Yeah.
if you look back to like they call it Quebecly Tepe, if anybody knows what that is, right?
Mhm.
That's the oldest megalithic structure that we can find to date, right? Which you feel like it was just a transfer of technology. So me going back to talking about how, you know, the last people after the Younger Dryas, you know, the people that lived through the Younger Dryas, trying to transport that technology that they had of agriculture, or that they had that we didn't know as a hunter-gatherer race.
Right.
So inevitably they think that Quebecly Tepe is just a school.
Yeah.
So the hunter-gatherers went to that school. So you had the elders that were, you know, dying off because they had all this knowledge, but they were old, trying to hand off, like, this is how you do modern agriculture. This is how you, like, you know, make megalithic fucking structures. Sorry about the bad language there, but
it's okay.
but
I dropped one too.
yeah,
We're not made for children here, so it's okay.
Okay.
No.
good deal.
NC-17 for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah. Pillar C-17. Yeah. Which you find in the Mayan temples, which you find in a bunch of who was before even the Mayans?
We had the Inca, the Aztecs,
the people with like the helmet sculptures, like the head helmet sculptures. I mean,
The
2
Hopi?
seconds. Maybe
The Hopi Indian were one of the original ones out of the deserts of like Arizona and the top of Mexico.
I wouldn't say those. I think it's more of a tropical region, or a South American.
Aborigines?
They're from Australia.
Right.
2 seconds here. I'm trying to look it
The
up.
Easter Island people.
Right.
They
So
were-
the Easter Island, there's a lot of things about that, and a lot of how like genomes of like the ancient Aborigines from Australia and early day like Homo sapiens of America have the same like kind of like genotype.
Olmec. Yeah, Omar says
Olmec. Yeah, Olmec. There we are.
Olmec.
Yep. So the Olmec
VJ said
also.
Olmec. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that pillar 13 subsection D or whatever the heck it's called, they all have like this same similar contrast to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, here's the thing about that too. I don't think modern man actually made that. Just like I don't think modern man built Pumapunku either. I think these were all left behind by ancient terrestrial, or whatever you want to call them. You know, our founders, our creators, you know, whatever. And I think a lot of that, like that deal there, I think it was buried on purpose. Maybe they didn't realize that we would find it, but I think they buried it to preserve it, you know, maybe for future,
actually,
you know.
So here's a theory as well. And I was just thinking about this on the car ride back home from Duluth to here.
Mm-hmm.
You look at like Quebecly Tepe, right? And we'll just use this as like an analogy.
Sure.
Quebecly Tepe was technically buried, like man-made, like man-made, like man buried this structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, during all of that time, you know, like humanity was restarting, right? So something happened, like they say the meteor hit Greenland, right, and forced an ice age. Now all of a sudden sea levels rised when the ice age melted within a couple weeks span, caused sea levels to rise 400 feet, right? People are panicking, right? In the Cold War, what did we do to every like defense mechanism that the United States had?
Yeah.
We buried it.
Yeah, basically.
So are you familiar with like the Tuareg meteor stream at all?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we passed through it 14 days out of June and 14 days out of November, right? They say it's equivalent to putting a blindfold on, running through rush hour traffic on a 6-lane highway and hoping not to get hit.
Right.
Right. And not getting hit is equivalent to a meteor destroying a majority of the humanity race, right?
Right. Nope, we lost Rob. He
Bummer.
might have went to Omar's show. But go ahead. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So you have, this phenomenon that we could potentially get hit by something bigger than what we ever can imagine us doing to ourselves twice a year for a total for a total of, no, you're totally fine, man. For a total of 28 days out of the year. So 1 month out of the year, we're in a grave danger of potentially getting destroyed as a humanity race, right? And going into the 6th generation of what Rob was talking about, right?
Right. Yeah.
Brutal.
So, I mean, you think about it that way, and now all of a sudden, everything just kind of unveils itself, right? You don't want to, everything that we had, right? Like you talk about Cold War, or trying to Quebecly Tepe, burying it so that way, your source of knowledge isn't lost, right? Like you have the Catholic cathedral that had all those, or the Roman library, right?
The Library of Alexandria.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened during all that? Like, how did it get destroyed? Well, during World War II, Hitler set fire to all of it because he didn't want.
A lot of them got burnt, stolen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So imagine all the information that we could have potentially had if modern researchers looked at ancient books, right? Ancient scribes.
Sure.
Oh God.
Right. Like, imagine how much knowledge we have now.
Exactly.
Well, they say that the Library of Alexandria was one of the most vast collections of ancient knowledge and history on the face of the earth at that point. And that actually got burned down during the siege of Alexandria during the Roman era. So
was it Roman? Was it like a Catholic debacle kind of a thing, or a Christianity debacle?
I believe it was what the hell's his name? It was Alexander the Great.
Yep.
Was invading. I think he was. I don't know if he was invading Alexandria, right? But something happened where it caught on fire and the whole thing just burnt to the ground.
Right.
Sucks, man. Just imagine how much knowledge we have now. Imagine how much clarity we would have now if that didn't burn down.
Well, and that's just it. And that's like with the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff. A lot of the ancient Bible texts are in that.
Right.
People hid them away so they wouldn't get stolen or destroyed or whatever. Obviously, somebody wanted to keep them. Original.
Well, of course, even the Catholic Church tried to get rid of some of those versions.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Of its own book.
Yeah,
because they didn't agree with the ideology of it.
Well, King James did the same thing.
In modern day, what's one thing that everything has in common?
In modern day,
yeah, like you look at history, we'll say, right? So you have like the ancient Mecca. Aztecs, or Quebecly Tepe, or I mean, really don't have anything in Quebecly, but like ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, right? They all have a flood. Ancient Egypt, they all have a flood.
Sure.
Yeah,
there's always a great deluge.
That all coincided during that last of the Younger Dryas.
Yeah.
Right. And they also, a lot of the different books, even down into China, have stories that were of, like, I'm Catholic by nature, but I'm not super Catholic, but they all have a description of Jesus.
Open-minded Catholic? Yeah.
Pretty much. Whether, I'm not sure that I agree with it at all. And if my mother's watching, I'm sorry, Ma, you know what? But, even down to the Chinese, they had a description of story that resembled Jesus. The ancient Sumerians had a story that resembled Jesus, which puts Jesus in a time period that's well before when he was supposed to be there.
Right.
So, a lot of that kind of stuff is history being manufactured to believe in a specific way. So
here's something people don't realize either when you talk about Jesus and the Bible and stuff. Jesus is only 2,000 years old, right? He died 2,000 years ago. Take a guess how old the Bible is.
Well, the Old Testament? Yeah, way older.
probably 4,000 years old, 5,000 years old.
2,700 years. 2,700 years. So the Bible came out before Christ even walked the face of the earth.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So, yeah, where a lot of people think, oh, yeah, the Bible wasn't written until after Jesus was here. No.
No, the
New
Old Testament, then the New Testament. That's how that goes.
Exactly. AD and BE, or BC.
Right.
So the BC is the Old Testament, and Christ, of course, is 1 AD, right?
Right.
AD.
Right.
So,
Anno
in the
Domini
year-
after Christ.
yeah. So the Old Testament was long before, Christ was here, and then AD, after death, would have been Jesus' time, which is the New Testament. So, yeah, but a lot of people can't put that together. They're like, wait a minute, how can that be? Well, it's, so yeah,
It is what it is.
Moses
It
and
is
them
what it
all did that because they didn't talk about Jesus Christ in the Old Testament. They talk about God.
There wasn't even a
everybody else.
reference towards him. There wasn't even a reference towards him
Right.
in the Old Testament.
So, yeah, they didn't start talking about Christ until the very first book of the Old Testament, Matthew, about his birth and yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, there's,
Right.
That's also like a really interesting thing too, is like you look at how much like a potentially DMT or like a tryptamine kind of influenced a lot of modern day culture now.
mhm.
Like they say Moses,
Right.
what was it? The Acacia or Acacia tree,
Right.
whatever the heck it is. Which sorry, just trying to read it, and dyslexia is not acting with me today.
That's
so,
okay. You're
So
fine.
anyway, so like when he got prescribed the Ten Commandments, right? He
Right.
was like the burning shrub
Right.
was a DMT rich tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have the potentially of him being on a DMT high or a trip, getting these commandments, and now basic humanity rides on these 10 commandments, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy. I hate to
Right.
cut you off, guys. I have to get going. I have the other show to go on with Omar.
Oh, yes. Go right ahead.
It was
Sure, man.
awesome talking to both of you guys. I look forward to doing it in the future. Shawn, I'm definitely going to have you on the Full Spectrum Universe once it
Yeah, man.
pops off, hits the ground running. Clarence, always a pleasure, guys. I hope
Yeah,
everybody
you
has a
too,
good
Rob.
night. Thank you for letting
Yeah,
me speak my mind. Always appreciated. And
Anytime.
I'll talk to you guys shortly. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good
All
one, man.
right. Thanks, Rob. Mr. Rob Oxmeyer from Beyond the Spectrum, Full Spectrum Universe. Cool.
Yeah, man. Good talking to that guy.
Yeah, he's cool. They're all
I really
cool.
like
you know
talking to
what I'm
open-minded people, right?
saying? So, anywho, let's see here. I wanted to share something with folks here. Let me bring this up real quick. This is an article.
No, Julie talked about trying to get into the Vatican Library. That'd be actually pretty cool, though.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
just kinda-
absolutely.
like you can definitely tell they're trying to hide something or another in there.
Let's see here. Chrome tab. Are you good at reading? Can you read this?
Oh, I'm dyslexic so bad. I barely passed high school because of dyslexia.
This was written by a guy by the name of Adam Frank,
Sure.
who's actually, let me scroll down here. It gives you a small description of him here at the bottom. He is a professor of astrophysicist
Mhm.
at the University of Rochester. His work has appeared in Scientific American, the New York Times, and NPR.
Okay.
He is the author of Light of the Stars, Alien Worlds, and the Fate of the Earth. So that's who this guy is that wrote
Pretty
this
cool.
article.
I can definitely check it out.
Yeah. But it's I'm not going to be able to read the whole thing, but it's quite a lengthy article.
Sure.
But he asks a question from the title. It says, "Was there a civilization on Earth before humans?" And then it says, it's a look at the available evidence, which is pretty awesome. And he talks about how it only took 5 minutes for Gavin Schmidt to out speculate me. Yeah. Schmidt is the director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, aka GISS, a world-class climate science facility. One day last year, I came to GISS with a far-out proposal. In my work as an astrophysicist, I began researching global warming from an astrobiological perspective. There we go. A big word. That meant asking whether any industrial civilization that rises on any planet will, through their own activity, trigger their own version of a climate shift. I was visiting GISS that day, hoping to gain some climate science insights and perhaps collaboration. That's how I ended up in Gavin's office. So he says, just as I was arriving, I was revving up my pitch. Gavin stopped me in my tracks. Wait a second, he said. How do you know we're the only time there's been a civilization on our own planet? How do you know we're the only time there's been a civilization on our own planet? It took me a few seconds to pick my jaw up off the floor. I had certainly come into Gavin's office prepared for eye rolls at the mention of exo-civilizations, but the civilizations he was asking about would have existed many millions of years ago. Sitting there, seeing Earth's vast evolutionary past telescope before my mind's eye, I felt a kind of temporal vertigo. Yeah, I stammered. Could we tell if there's been an industrial civilization that deep in time? And of course, it goes back, and he says,
Right.
we never got back to the alien part of it.
Right.
And, but instead, the first conversation launched a new study that they recently has published. And, it gives you to think about that. So it's pretty cool. But
so, I mean, hopping on board with that, like, I guess the first time we've been industrial,
mhm.
I mean, I feel like we've been productive industrializing like for a while, like even before what we are now. Like, obviously, historians would double check, in case people were mining iron and copper before the whole copper era and iron era and all that other jazz, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. It's just kind of interesting though. Like, I mean, I'll take a minute when we're done here and go through this whole entire
that's
article
cool.
and whatnot.
Go right ahead.
But yeah, definitely. So my friend Leah now is watching, which is actually pretty sick.
Cool.
She just commented something or another here, so I don't know if you can grab that and toss her up on.
Yeah, let me see here.
So
what's your guys' opinion on this whole technology thing? Are we not advancing and going downhill or uphill? He mentioned we're getting dumber, so I'm curious.
Yeah. I feel like we've hit like a low aspect of it. Yes. Like, I feel like we're recovering from being a dumber race and we're heading towards the future. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
basically what we're talking about as far as getting dumber, it's not really the whole race itself. What we're talking about is civilization as we know it. You got to remember that back in the day, especially in caveman days and stuff like that, they lived in tribes. They were a community, so they were always helping each other out. You had a group that would be hunters. You had a group that would be childbearing, that raised the kids.
Almost like a utopia thing. Like if you read the book The Giver back in the day, kind of like
right.
Right. Like they're talking about a utopia where everybody has a role. I get that aspect of it.
Right. But see,
so-
here in today's society, we don't have that like that. You see,
right.
we
Everybody
don't
can hold
share our
multiple
stuff with
roles.
one another. You know, I mean, we do to a point. You know, as an individual, we may share, but not as a society, as a group. You know,
Right.
plus we didn't. You know, they didn't have like one leader back in those times.
Yeah, we were more of a
Demanding.
free people, I would think.
Yeah, basically, you know, I mean, there were leaders, don't get me wrong, and there were higher ups, and you know, until the anarchy started happening, you know, as time went on. But basically, what I'm saying is they didn't keep their people stupid. You know, everybody knew what everybody was doing and how it was supposed to be done. Blah blah blah. Where nowadays in this society, you have a handful of certain ones that want to keep people on the down low.
Right.
All right. They want to hide evidence. They want to hide timelines. They want to hide everything from everybody because if they showed everything that supposedly actually happened and what they knew, they would have to rewrite history. You know, that's the whole key to this, you know. So that's basically what we're talking about, keeping people dumb and stuff, because the problem is now that the facts are actually coming out and more people are pushing for the truth, you know, they're no longer going to these scientists and stuff and saying, here, take a look at this, what do you think? They're coming out with it on their own saying, hey, look what I got.
Right,
you
right,
know,
right.
Here it is in your face. You explain it to me, you know? So that's what's
Right.
happening.
Well,
Which is pretty cool.
so talking on the whole like aspect of conflict and everything too, back when like you can trace back to like human conflict all the way back to like the biblical era, right? Like you can talk about how, you know, David versus Goliath, you can find that fight legitimately within like, you know, the ground, right? You can dig up the ground back in I forget the area of where that fight was. Shoot. Anyway, you can go back there and, you know, dig up and you can find, you know, the warheads and the spearheads and the broken
Right.
spears and whatnot.
Right.
Like obviously saying that there was a fight there, and you can have the biblical version of how, like, you know, they documented it, right?
Yes.
Well, you can go back and like, you know, even you know, find deeper, you know, fights like, you know, the Polynesians versus the Spartans, or, you know, like, you know, you can go back in time and find where people had like, you know, an army fighting each other, right?
Sure.
Like, but one place where you can't is right when that, like I was talking about this earlier, the warming period after the Younger Dryas, right? So after like the whole Garden of Eden and everything happened, everybody had enough food, everybody had enough, you know, land and whatnot to be happy and be a happy utopia of a society.
Right.
And prosper. Like there was no fighting or climatic you know, war or anything like that between factions or people during that whole time, right? Like you can dig up all wherever you want, where they have done so much research and stuff in the past of where they've, you know, where certain factions were, right? Like, you know, the ancient Romans and shit like that.
Right.
Like you can dig up there and you can find where, like, you know, they've written down battlefields and stuff like that, but you can't find where, you know, when everybody was happy and they had all what they needed, like they had food, water, and, you know, the people,
Sure.
right, to keep each other going. You can't find where, you know, there's any sort of like clash battle, or, you know, like any sort of like faction clash or war or anything like that in the past, until you start hitting that decline of temperature.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden now, you know, fields or harvest becomes scarce and there's not enough food to feed the people, kind of a thing. And then people go into that primal instinct.
Right. Yeah. We almost did it with this COVID thing. Yeah.
Right.
David says we just need an alien civilization 450 million light years away to observe us through a telescope and then report their findings in faster than light speed.
Right.
That's funny.
I'll tell you, man, there's somebody watching us, I swear.
Thomas says we're 1,000 years ahead secretly than what's publicly available. Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, you talk about the Freemasons, man. You get the Freemasons involved in this whole debacle, and all of a sudden, the ancient society of like the Illuminati is way too, open about like a conspiracy group, but there's definitely an underlining group of a people or a society that has the knowledge.
All right. Yeah. Leah says, is the biblical version even accurate, though? Well, here's the thing about that. And there's so many. Well, here's the thing. When you're doing history and stuff like that, you can't rely just on one particular book like the Bible. There's been so many different writings from so many different cultures and so many different civilizations, you got to read them all and you got to understand them all, and that's a hard thing to do.
Like there's a lot of corresponding evidence of so many you have the Quran, you have like the scribes, you have the Bible and all this other stuff that all have similar things that happen like behind the scenes, but they put their own twist to it, if you will.
Right. Yeah. And there's some things that weren't even kept in our Bible. Some things that Constantine and them put in back in the day. King James came along and took them back out, and he added his stuff in. I mean, it's been rewritten and scholars. I mean, there's tons and tons of Dead Sea Scroll things that they found that weren't even put in the Bible that should have been, different books and stuff. And that's why I think the Dead Sea Scrolls were saved like they were, because the people that had them knew that wasn't the full story. So they kept them scrolls hidden, and so hopefully somebody someday would find them and go, oh, there's more to the story,
Right.
And, which was cool. Unfortunately, they were not in good shape and we didn't get much out of them, but
that's like trying to figure out the cuneiform of well, I mean, really more or less anybody, like trying to figure out the scribes of anybody going back in the past, like anything written on the walls of like caves in ancient civilization time,
absolutely.
Right? Like it's all just a translation of what you think was going on, but could be completely different of what you actually thought was going on compared to what they were trying to write.
Well, not only that, but you got to keep in mind too, and I've said this 100 times over, things like the Bible, especially the Bible, they're not talking about anything that happened on this side of the world. Everything that's written in those scriptures happened on that side of the world. Okay. Right. We didn't even exist here as far as they were concerned. They had no idea there was other humans on this side of the globe, So you got to remember that kind of stuff when you're talking about Bibles and things like that, because everything was written over there, It had nothing to do with us over here or anybody else, We were
right, and it's really close-minded to think that people over here weren't actually living and prospering during that time as well, right?
Right. Yeah. Jody says King made religion a form of law. Definitely have to research translations. Yeah, absolutely. But and then again, it's like Mesopotamia and the Vandu Valley people and stuff like that. They had their own form of writing. A lot of people, tried to translate certain ones. And then they're mistranslated, by certain ones, and then other people grab a hold of that and run with it, and so on and so forth. So it's really a hard thing to do. It really is. It's tough. So, but as far as today's society, we're not getting the full truth or the full detail behind it. But, there's no doubt that the evidence, and there's more coming. I mean, ain't no doubt about it. We're not done searching and digging and doing whatever. Right.
And as more radar happens across the whole entire world, the more ancient civilizations and more knowledge we're going to get about what happened in the past to pave the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. but it's just phenomenal. But yeah, it's just, just a crazy thing to think how much advanced we've become just in the last 100 years or so. It's just, wow. The knowledge has just been boom. It's crazy. But yeah, I think there has been many different entities here on this planet long before we were,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like with the dinosaur. We talked about that with Omar and that before, like the T-Rex, he's full of radiation and stuff, which is telling me that either a couple of things happened. Either there was a major radioactive cataclysm that happened here,
Right.
But it only wiped out that one species, only gave that one species radioactive bones,
Right.
So
That's super interesting too. I haven't looked into that at all.
Yeah, well, we came to the conclusion that he was wiped out on purpose. He was kind of how you say sorted out and then killed off.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, they think. I honestly think he was eradicated on purpose for whatever reason. But
I'm gonna take a quick bathroom break here, there, Clarence.
Yeah, actually, I'm getting kind of messed up here myself. It's getting harder and harder to talk here. I have to go do some nebbing or do whatever I have to do. But I tell you what, if you'd like to come back tomorrow night, if you got the time, I'd like to do another show. Now, I was going to do a cryptid show tomorrow night, but actually, Omar and I want to get together and we want to do a big, like a 3 or 4 hour one day deal on this, because there's so much to talk about when it comes to cryptids, Bigfoot and Mothman and fairies and all that kind of cool stuff, So I think tomorrow night what I'm going to do is, I want to show a documentary. I put it on my page and stuff about giants that walk the earth and things like that. And that also kind of coincides with what we're talking about tonight. Mm-hmm. So I think what I'm going to do is probably around, I'm going to say about 4:30-ish, somewhere around there. I'm going to come on the air and I'm going to play that documentary for folks to see, kind of like a watch party thing.
Yep.
And then right after that, I'm going to start my regular show and we can talk about that documentary and so on and so forth. So,
sure.
Yeah. So if
I'll be heading back to Duluth here probably tomorrow at about 1:30. So I'll just bring my mic and everything, and I'll have my laptop on me. So if I can sneak in for 20, 30 hour or whatever I can, for sure.
Absolutely. That'd be cool. So we'll do that. We'll plan on doing that. And I'll save this other piece here for tomorrow. Hopefully I can read it better.
Sure.
But we'll do that. I'll save that for tomorrow. And then yeah, in the meantime, we'll get rested up and stuff and be cool. So yeah, we'll do that. So I'll be here myself, and I'll show that particular movie. It's a documentary. It's about an hour and a half long, give or take. And then right after that documentary, I'll end that broadcast and then I'll restart a new broadcast. And we'll talk about that documentary. So, so we'll be here at 6 o'clock as far as Closer Encounters goes. But as far as the documentary, it'll be like right around 4:30 or so. So we get the full thing in. So we'll do it that way. All right. Sounds good.
Well, definitely.
Shawn, I appreciate you being here, man. No doubt. It's cool.
Definitely.
Glad we met and glad that, we have a few things in common. That's awesome.
For sure. Cool. For sure. Definitely looking forward to coming on here at some point again here.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have you on tomorrow night. So, yeah. Awesome.
Deal. Talk me into it.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, bud. Okay, folks. Well, with that being said, I guess we'll cut her short here. Actually, short. We've been on over 2 hours now, so that's okay. But as you can see, I'm having a little difficulty here, so I'm going to have to go do some nebulizing or something. It was 62 here today, and it's time to start opening up the windows and get the get the air changed in this house. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, but I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I'm so happy to see you guys, and I'll be on. Like I said, I'll start. I'll start a show here on StreamYard, and I can share the screen and stuff, and we'll do that. We'll do that documentary that I had posted in Closer Encounters and stuff, and we'll show that. And then after that documentary, I'll actually start a new show. So I'll end that, and then I'll come back on as Closer Encounters, and we'll have another show about that particular documentary. So I think that'd be cool. So, okay. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for being here, and until we see you tomorrow night, please stay safe out there, and enjoy the rest of your evening. So thank you all very, very much for being here. I want to thank you all for listening to Closer Encounters. Please remember to like, follow, and share. And until we meet again, keep your eyes to the skies. Thank you. Thank you all.